Welcome to season 2 of the Nerd Review. This is the show where we talk about movies, TV shows, video games, books, and comic books. Today you're listening to episode 7, and we're going to be talking about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. So it is the horror adaptation of Winnie the Pooh. But before we jump into that, we're going to talk about the history of Winnie the Pooh, the background, and the road to how we got to this new interpretation of Winnie the Pooh. So let's jump into that now. I have so many fond memories of Winnie the Pooh that I absolutely cherish from my childhood. And as I say this, the irony is not lost on me that we're about to talk about a homicidal version of my beloved childhood character. But I digress. We'll get to all the blood and honey mayhem in a moment. But first, let's talk about Winnie the Pooh and the gang and the magical 100-acre woods that it all took place in. So, like I said, I was a huge fan of Winnie the Pooh. I had the VHS tapes, multiple stuffed Pooh Bears. I had Piglet, Tigger, the whole gang. It was so much fun to play make-believe with those stuffed plushed animals and play along with the idea that they were, all springing to life. And it was so much fun. And I have so many fond memories of that. My favorite by far, I remember I had this one Pooh Bear that had this pot of honey, and in his hand he had this, it was the spoon, and it was made of plastic, but it looked like wood. And if you touch the spoon to the honey pot, he would talk about how good the honey was, and if you tapped the spoon without any honey, he would go, "Oh bother, I've got a rumbly in my tumbly." This was absolutely the funnest thing my 5-year-old self had ever heard. Alas, I don't have any of these stuffed Poohs anymore. Yet another thing sitting in my eBay watched items list. I'm pretty sure that cart is up to a few $1,000s worth of nostalgic 90s kids toys that I want them so bad. Though I do still have one pretty cool Winnie the Pooh collectible. I have this really beautiful hardcover collection of Winnie the Pooh. It collects all the original stories by A.A. Milne, written almost 100 years ago. This is a reprint of a collection of from Disney, of course. It has the original iconic illustrations done by E.H. Shepard. And it's mind-boggling to think that it's been 97 years since Milne wrote those first Winnie the Pooh stories. And it's incredible that he wrote those stories based on his own son, Christopher Robin. That's the titular character, not the titular character, but that's Winnie the Pooh is the titular character. The main character of the stories, you could say was Christopher Robin. It was his toys, and that were coming to life. And that was his son named Milne, A.A. Milne. His son's name was Christopher Robin, and it was based on his son and his toys. And one of those toys that just so happened to include this stuffed teddy bear named Winnie the Pooh. And I find that amazing. I also always find myself wondering though, what if Christopher Robin's bear wasn't named Winnie? Is there another timeline where it's Wilfred the Pooh, or maybe Winifred the Pooh? I love good multiverse theory. But jokes aside, it's this humble and earnest background. I read during my research that Milne's intention and motivation was to create a world of imagination and wonder for children, one that would inspire them to explore their own imaginations and create their own stories. He wanted to capture this innocent, joyful spirit of childhood, and it's just so poetic. He succeeded brilliantly with Winnie the Pooh stories. It's exactly what I remember, and what I was saying about my most fond memories of Winnie the Pooh are those hours spent playing make-believe with my very own Pooh Bear, creating my very own stories around these charming characters who cared about their friends and have these adventures around the woods. It's amazing still that kids can relate to these stories, considering how different life was 97 years ago. But it also highlights that some of those simple things in life, a child and their favorite stuffed animal and the magic that surrounds them, is timeless. So I think it's like I said, it's poetic, it's amazing. And that's what I remember most about Winnie the Pooh. He was a stuffed bear safety blanket that allowed me to fuel my imagination. That is until the other night. I have a whole new set of memories of Winnie the Pooh Bear now, but those are kind of messed up. we'll get to that. Like I said, the irony's not lost on me that we're about to review the homicidal rage monster that has been the new incarnation of Winnie the Pooh, but we're getting to that. But I think, like, jokes aside, like I said, I think A.A. Milne deserves some credit and a few minutes of, you know, this episode, that just to like take a moment to appreciate what he was able to capture and bottle this real world magic that his son saw in those childhood toys and shared those whimsical adventures with the world, and so many generations of kids have enjoyed the stories of Winnie the Pooh because of his writings, which is incredible. And it's worth mentioning and remembering the real world people who create the wonderful stories we all get to enjoy, and we get to grow up with them. That's, for me, that's a huge part of what makes movies and TV shows and books and comic books and everything I've talked about in every episode of the Nerd Review. There's something so interesting and captivating that every single story, picture, every frame of a video game has to be thought up, written, drawn, or programmed by somebody or a whole team of individuals, possibly spread out over the whole world, even across time. Some of them have worked on the same franchise, the same characters, and they've been part of creating a legacy that has become like a lifeline, you know, for someone struggling, or they've just been a part of their best memories of childhood. And for anyone's creation, you know, everyone's character to still be popular, to be part of culture almost 100 years later is absolutely amazing. And since 1926, that little yellow bear and all of his friends have become such an iconic classic and beloved character for both kids and adults. Like myself, I grew up with Winnie the Pooh in those movies and those stories, and to this day, I cherish it, and I love this new interpretation. And like I said, we're going to get to that, don't worry. It's amazing to think of all the generations who've been able to experience Winnie the Pooh, from those first stories that were published in the London Evening News. They were just a series of stories and later collected and reprinted as the first book, the Winnie the Pooh with the hyphens in between, to the sequels, and then the Disney acquisition in 1961, and the adaptation of the stories into animated features released in the 60s and into the 70s. To this day, one of my favorite kids movies is Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, which was released in 1974. It would be almost 30 years old by the time I would start to see it. I would start to say that I would watch this in the late 90s, and Disney wasn't done yet. Going into the 80s, there was the animated series The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which aired on the Disney Afternoons, which was a 2-hour programming block that ran on UPN, ABC, and CBS. And it's amazing, these things like programming blocks. And I mean technically, yeah, they do still exist if you have like traditional cable, but I haven't had traditional cable since 2009, so like it's like a fond memory of mine. It's years ago the last time I had to see like a bumper or something. I just created a GIF the other day of a bumper for TGIF, because I was explaining to a colleague of mine what TGIF was, and I realized I couldn't find a proper GIF, so I made one, and then I was looking up like all these TV bumpers and stuff, and it's like I haven't seen one of these in so long. Like I see the Netflix intro, but it doesn't hit the same. It's like the from the Teletoon special when I was making that. I was looking at all these different Teletoon bumpers for in between the episodes and stuff, and it's just there's something special about something like I'm getting a little tongue tied. I'm gonna cut that out. Something special about those bumpers that you grew up with, and it's funny to say that these bumpers you grew up with, these TV ads, these spots, these creations, these little artworks, they these little segments, they stick with you, and the Disney afternoons, they had the Winnie the Pooh, the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. It ran from 1988 to 1991, and then it would live on in syndication for years to come. By the late 90s, early 2000s, when I entered the scene and started consuming all of this kid entertainment, again, Winnie the Pooh was already getting an update treatment from Disney, and that's when they release a handful of new movies, including my second favorite, the Tigger movie. clearly I was a Tigger fan. I grew up in a household of cats, though surprisingly none of the cats were ever named Tigger. Actually, small cat related tangent, all of our cats were named after cars. We had Mercedes and Bentley, and then Dakota and Diesel, and our current feline fur babies are Hemi, which is short for hemispherical engine, something like that. It's like what you have 6 Hemis or something, or you have like a Hemi engine, that's whatever. And Lexi, short for Lexus. But okay, back to Winnie and Friends. Now, of course, over the years, I lost interest in Winnie the Pooh, though I will say I do frequently use the abbreviation in text, TTFN, Tata for now. I always liked that instead of like bye or whatever, especially when we started texting and everything became shorthand. I like TTFN. I do say oh bother at work, or like on an email sometimes when I'm chatting with the guys in IT. If a user has done something specifically moronic that day, I might reply with a good oh bother. And I love the use of GIFs and the inclusion of GIF keyboards now, because I could literally just say, like, I can send like a little Tigger GIF saying TTFN, or I could send a little Winnie the Pooh going oh bother, I love that. But I was no longer the target demographic for Winnie the Pooh, and for the last 20 something years I barely heard anything about the franchise. I assumed there was new movies and TV shows being made, as is the case with most franchises. That was until last year when I came across an article about quote Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, a nightmare reimagining of the beloved bear. That was the name of the IGN article, and I was hooked right away. As I've said on many occasions, I'm a huge horror fan. I began my own tradition, sneaking out of my room for secret R-rated 1 a.m. viewings from the family VHS collection. These are things you could do when your TV unit was like on the second floor or in the basement or something, or like far enough away from the rooms of everybody else that you're not going to wake anybody up if you sit directly in front of the TV. Though I was never in my wildest dreams did I think I would have the pleasure of watching a beloved childhood character turned into a raging murder monster. A premise I do strongly feel myself and others of my generation were predestined to enjoy, and I will explain that vis-a-vis the following. That is my brother, friends, and people born around the mid to late 90s, we got to grow up with series and some really wild things like Happy Tree Friends. If you aren't familiar, pause this right now, pause the podcast, quickly YouTube Happy Tree Friends, watch a couple of the videos. They're short videos, and then come back. Okay, I'm gonna wait. So okay, I assume you've done that. I assume you just paused and you watched at least one video. Like I said, they're like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes max. Now, Happy Tree Friends is a series. If you decided not to watch it, if you're in the car, maybe you're running or you're jogging, you're an active person. Good for you. Happy Tree Friends is a series of animated shorts intended for a mature audience. We were not a mature audience, let me tell you. In the early 2000s, they came out in 1999, probably sometime around video sharing on the internet, so like 2004, 2005. I'm still in like elementary school. I'm in 5th grade. I'm like 10, 11 years old. They come out and they become super popular. And what Happy Tree Friends is, were these cute animals that get royally fucked up. And I'm talking like exploding heads, lit on fire, skewered to death by a vending machine that fell over, or being run over by a cuddly cute moronic moose on a riding lawnmower. It was a hilariously violent animated bloodbath, and we fucking loved it. To this day, the Happy Tree Friends jingle, I'm gonna put it right here. it still makes me laugh so hard, and now I just want to binge 40 minutes of mindless cartoon mayhem. Now, all this to say that spending hours watching these accident-prone, adorable munchkins get creamed in a variety of comical manners, in my expert opinion, was the seedlings of my fandom for cartoon violence and comedic violence in animation. Like series like Paradise PD and My Little Demon, which is, a newer series, and just like constant, characters being blown up and just wild antics that you can never do in live action, because obviously you can't blow up all your characters and it costs a fortune. So I loved this, and this is which circles back to my statement that these type of series, Happy Tree Friends, stuff like that, they became such a phenomenon among my age group. They proliferated. People continued to make these violent animations that I was already a fan of the idea of taking cute, lovable childhood characters and making them into bloodthirsty rage demons. It's an appealing premise, hence predestined to enjoy this movie and movies in this genre. So, think Chucky. It's a really good example of a similar concept. It's a child's play doll that is possessed and murders people. And what an absolutely banging series Chucky is. Am I right? I'm right. I know I'm right. So upon further reading, it turned out like that article that I was talking about, right? So there was like Blood and Mayhem is coming to, theaters near you if you're lucky enough to have a screening near you, and I was not. So I had to pirate the movie, and I apologize to if anybody from the production team is listening, which I hope you are. I loved your movie, and I will buy it when it's available on DVD, but there was no screenings available in my area, so I was very disappointed. So but let's backtrack. So upon reading and further research, it turned out that Winnie the Pooh had left copyright protection earlier in 2022, in January of 2022. Which opens a whole other can of worms, which is what is public domain and why does it matter? So as a brief explanation for anyone who isn't familiar with these concepts, in simple terms, the public domain refers to creative works such as books, music, artwork, and films that are not protected by copyright. This means that anyone can use, copy, modify, and distribute these works freely without needing to ask permissions or pay royalties to the original creator or owner. In most countries, copyright lasts for the lifetime of the creator plus a certain number of years after their death. If it's a corporation, it's just like a set 95 years. And so now after which the work enters the public domain. Now there's a ton of information about copyright, and I'll refer you to a super informative video. It's super informative. It was very informative to me, that about copyright law by CPG Gray. He's a creator on YouTube that I follow. It's not a paid promotion or anything. It just happens to be the video that I like to refer people to. It's about 5 minutes. It's very digestible. What it comes down to and how it pertains to Winnie the Pooh is that A.A. Milne first published Winnie the Pooh in 1926, right? We mentioned it's 97 years. So now under the copyright protection of 1909 stipulated that it was protected for 95 years after publication. So in 2022, it means that it's no longer under copyright. Now, this doesn't mean that everything related to Winnie the Pooh is up for grabs. Corporations have pushed the government to increase the terms of copyright protection. Some say in a clear effort to protect their future earnings, and not in an effort to promote creativity and inspire young authors and artists, which is a heated debate amongst scholars of copyright law and intellectual property and all of these things that you open when you look into what copyright and public domain is. In the case of Winnie the Pooh, all the original stories, characters, settings are now copyright free. However, anything that Disney worked on starting in 1961 have copyright protection for another 95 years. This includes the animated version of Tigger, like as just an example, whose copyright won't end until sometime roughly until like 2056. So it gets very complicated. I mean, copyright is like a complex legal onion. Like it has many layers, but like so suffice to say, like Winnie the Pooh and certain characters are now in the public domain, and there are some freedoms to rework and remake these characters into new stories. So that's where we enter Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. let's actually jump into this movie now. Written, produced, and directed by Rhys Frake Waterfield, who, according to interviews, grew up watching Winnie the Pooh and has always considered himself a fan. Rhys and his business partner Scott Jeffrey, they founded Jagged Edge Productions in 2020, and they began releasing low-budget films such as The Area 51 Incident and Spider in the Attic, both of which Rhys Frake Waterfield wrote and directed as well. And both of those movies were received favorably. They had above average reviews from their circles and their circuit. These movies aren't trying to compete with your tent pole blockbuster movies. They're low budgets, under $100,000. They're using their own money. They're sourcing. They're finding investors, and they're putting out really solid product with attention to detail and attention on cinematography and lighting and all of these things that sometimes get overlooked in this lower, this, if you want to call them B movies, but just low budget films, independent films. And they're gems. Honestly, these guys are making gems, and each of their movies is just getting better and better. And this last one is finally getting some of the praise and attention that it really deserves. And so, like, as I was, there's some interviews and readings and stuff on the subject of why Winnie the Pooh. Frake Waterfield had this to say in a quote: "We always want to pick something that's very hooky. We want to create a product which instantly stands out, and when people see it, they go, 'What the hell is that?'" So he goes on to say, "I'm a massive fan of horror. When I knew that this was in the public domain, suddenly the sparks started flying. I was like, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see Winnie the Pooh as a horror. So we thought, okay, let's just go for it," which is amazing. And after penning the script himself, work began on casting the roles, which actually turned out to be pretty hard, according to him. According to Frake Waterfield, the director and producer and writer, they were turned down by many of the actors they approached. Eventually, they did find a cast of just super talented young thespians who were absolutely beautiful. Goddamn, young people are gorgeous these days. When I was in high school and my late teens, early 20s, no one looked like that. So finally they got a good cast together. Nikolai Leon as Christopher Robin, who gave a superb performance. He was crying on cue, complete hysterics on cue, really, and he really sold being terrified, which as like a young, like I said, as a young thespian in the craft, like it's really nice to see that that level of talent and performance. And they stepped into these roles, these maybe comical roles that were like other people turned down, and these guys they stepped up to what they signed in for, and they did a really good job. And that just goes into many of the things that I praise about this movie that I really enjoyed. And then the man behind the terrifying Pooh mask was David Dowsett, who's over 6 feet tall, something that Waterfield specifically wanted for Pooh, to make him intimidating and menacing as possible, which absolutely this is not our cuddly Pooh Bear, that's for sure. The rest of the cast was fantastic. I watched an interview with one of the young thespians, Amber Thorne. She plays Alice in the movie, and her performance was amazing. She's some great interactions with Pooh and Piglet, and a spectacular performance, really. Like I said, I love this entire movie. So I mean, okay, let's talk about the movie. The movie was fantastic. It was just freaking fantastic. That's what I have to say about it. Frake Waterfield had a vision for the film, and he clearly understood horror, having already dabbled in the field and produced and directed the two films prior. He he's he even said in interviews there's an attention on cinematography that he understands, and he goes out and tries to put the effort in to make it as polished as possible and to appeal to the wide cinema audiences that they expect these Hollywood budget movies with this amazing cinematography and camera work. And it's a lot of experience too, and having a high budget gives you access to great cameras and stuff, and then you have to if you don't have that budget and stuff, you have to blend your experience, and then you have to be savvy. You have to know how to make something look a certain way when you don't have the easy tech to, like flip a switch or pay somebody to make it look good. So he had this vision, and I mean, the cinematography is really good. The camera movement is smooth. The lighting and color created this distinct atmosphere for each of the settings. So let's talk about the movie. The movie opens with this pen sketched of this alternate version of the Christopher Robin story and his friends in the 800 Acre Woods. One where he meets these half animal, half human hybrids in the wood. Very sweet tooth. And he befriends these hybrid children. After years of friendship, Christopher, he has to leave for college, and he hopes his friends, Pooh and Owl and Bear and Piglet, Pooh, Owl, Rabbit, and Piglet, they can do well without him. Now, unfortunately, it's not the case. The 100 Acre Woods, they're not full of game or food and stuff like that. Times get tough for the gang, and so Pooh, he makes a tough decision to kill and eat Eeyore. That poor bastard never stood a chance. This entire opening sequence really sets up the creep factor. The penned drawings have these shapes and proportions of the original illustrations of E.H. Shepard as per the copyright stipulations, except now they're all like creepy and lanky, and now after Christopher Robin leaves, they become like thin, and you can see their ribs, and they're even more like gonky and I think that's a word, and lanky, and it's super fucking creepy. So as the story goes, after killing and eating Eeyore, they become mad. They renounce humanity, vowing never to talk again, and they embrace their animalistic natures. Now, after this penned section, we cut 5 years later. It's an older for Christopher Robin. He's about to finish college, and he's about to marry his gal Mary. The character's name is Mary, played by Paula Quez, who he loves very much, and she gives a great performance, by the way. She's just not in the movie for very long. There's going to be a little bit of spoilers. She's not in the movie for very long. I'll try to limit the spoilers. I'll try to limit the spoilers. I'm not going to give away the ending or all the manners of death, stuff like that. I'll talk about what I like and why I love this movie so much, but I'm not going to spoil the movie too much. There's going to be a few spoilers. So he loves her very much, and lovingly tells her, she gets a bit spooked out in the woods. He's taking her to see, the 100 Acre Woods and introduce her to his old friends, because he wants to prove that he's not crazy, and that these creatures, these animal people, they existed, and that he wasn't making it up. He wasn't playing make-believe. So she gets a bit creeped out. It's the forest. It's a bit rainy. It's overcast. It's England. It's always like that. She was, so he tells her lovingly that she will be all right, and that he's going to protect her. Well, she's going to be the first to die. Slasher movie rules, man. You're the reason Pooh Bear's killing everyone, and you're going to pay for that. Sorry, bud, I don't make the rules, but I do enjoy watching them be brutally upheld by the absolutely terrifying antagonists of the popular slasher franchises. I'm getting tongue-tied again. So, she dies, is what I'm saying. Pooh and Piglet make very good use of chains in this movie, and Mary bites it in like 10 minutes, at the 10-minute marker, and it just ramps up from there. I loved everything here as they explore the old treehouse and the forest, and there's so much attention to detail, and it all adds to the creep factor. The empty mason jars of honey that are tipped over, the unnoticed human skull on the pile of firewood, Eeyore's grave that's he literally just says like, rest in peace, Eeyore. So like Christopher Robin, he doesn't escape Pooh or Piglet, who is not a piglet anymore and is just like a full-grown 6-foot pig behemoth with these gnarly tusks and swinging a sledgehammer, like a nightmare version of Bebop. It's amazing. We get a really good horror movie newspaper headline montage right after this, very Harry Potter in the Order of the Phoenix, and I'm like 100% certain there are other horror movies that have like done this too, but I couldn't find anything while Googling. It's one of those things where it's just like it's too specific to Google. It's the worst. So like the headlines are all about people going missing around the 100 Acre Woods. So like Christopher Robin showed up, pissed them off, and now people are going missing, no bodies are being found, and people, the police are being baffled by this string of disappearance. And then as it opens up, we're introduced to the main cast. So there's this like newspaper montage. All of this happens very well paced. It's like 15-20 minutes. They did the opening sketch in like 2 minutes, not even. They have the interaction between Christopher Robin and Mary, and they don't really show you much of Pooh and Piglet at this point. You see like their leg, because it's kind of like in the not like a first person perspective or a POV or anything, but they're focusing on Christopher and Mary, who are trying to like hide, and so like they're under the bed, and you see like big black boots, and you see the overalls, or you see something like that, and then you see the chain and you see the hands, but you don't really see the face because Christopher Robin was still like hiding behind a car sort of thing. It's very well teased out, and so now at this point, now we're introduced after the news scroll, like I was saying, now we're introduced to the main cast. Maria, played by Maria Taylor, which I always makes me wonder if the character was named that and then they just so happened to cast somebody with that name, or like did they change the character name? I always wonder when that happens. She gave a great performance. Now, in the character Maria is dealing with some trauma, and at the advice of her therapist, she's getting some time away, a girls' weekend at a nice country cottage that, unfortunately for her and her gal pals, is right up against the 100 Acre Woods. Super unfortunate. And at the house, finally, when they get to the house, we meet the rest of the cast. Jessica, Alice, sorry, that was Amber Thorne. I watched some of her interviews and behind the scenes stuff for my research part of the podcast. Laura and Zoe. So the first thing I did was try to suss out who was going to be the final girl. And if you're not a slasher horror fan, or you aren't familiar with that title, the final girl is the one who survives the slasher attack, who kills the ghost face, defeats Freddy, or chains Jason to a rock at the bottom of Crystal Lake. They are the final girl. There's actually a movie on Netflix called Final Girls, I believe. It's a horror comedy. 100% recommend this. But I digress. The girls arrive and they're waiting for a sixth friend, Tina, but Tina ain't coming. She's gotten lost and wanders into the 100 Acre Woods. Now, unfortunately for Tina, she crossed paths with Pooh, who we finally get a good look at. Oh, the 6 foot tall, like overall clad nightmare fuel that is Winnie the fucking Pooh. That face is absolutely haunting, just completely haunting. There are scenes when he's just shoving honey in his face, and there's blood splattered all over his face at this point, and the honey is just dripping, and it gives me shivers. It was unnerving. The scenes were expertly shot, and they really captured this like warped mind of this incarnation of Pooh. You know, he's there like just like guzzling honey, and he's been eating people, completely cut off from society and humanity. It was super well done. Yeah, I could gush. I could continue to gush forever. It was so well done. So the movie has 84-minute runtime, and it doesn't waste a second of it. Tina had no hopes of escaping Pooh, and like I can understand why the cast would have. I'll get to it, but there's a thing about the cast having trouble to get through any of the scenes with Pooh. So like Tina had no hopes of escaping Pooh. Pooh. Like, yeah, that made me laugh too. And her demise, it really settled the debate for me of, is this going to be a good horror movie? And then I watched it and I was left slack-jawed and speechless, and I could only think, yep, this is going to be a wild ride. And I sat up a bit in my chair, so I could pay full attention to this insanity on screen. And so while the gals are settling in at the cottage, we follow Pooh around the now terrifying hangout that has like half-eaten carcasses. It's a joke. I'll get to. Hanging from the rafters, and there are jars and jars of honey, like just littering every shelf, and all there's these skeletons hanging from the rafters, like I said. One of which is Mary, like the Christopher Robin's future wife. She's like, they've already like stripped her of all of her flesh, and she's just like a meaty skeleton, which he drags out and like throws in front of Christopher while he's like tied up, because he's just a hostage now because he wants him to suffer, which just, oh man, yeah. So now we know why, like, we know how they've survived. We know why the cops aren't finding any of the bodies. It's just a joke. Like, it's a joke from What We Do in the Shadows, this comedy on FX, and one of the characters pronounces it bodies. So then that was the thing with the cacosses. Instead of carcasses, it's cacaws. So I'll get back to this, the movie at hand. So from there, we follow these 5 gals and at the cottage, and when Pooh and Piglet wander by, they decide that they don't like people being so close to their home, because the cottage is actually pretty close by to where their like treehouse and their like / junkyard is. I guess they've been stealing stuff, and they just go all out. I was pleasantly shocked at the different deaths and the practical effects of the low budget movie. I mean, they're still absolutely mind-blowing. In that interview with Amber Thorne, like I said, that I watched it, she said that it was about 85% practical effects, and like only the obvious, the kills, like had some CGI added in post, like an eyeball popping out of somebody's head and all the gory stuff like that. The rest was genuine art being made on screen. Practical effects requires so much detail, and it's all makeup and prosthetics, and on a low budget, it makes the movie that much more amazing. And we'll talk about the budget and the box office in a moment. I mean, it's even more impressive when you know the numbers. So we'll get on in it. So the gals start to meet their doom at the blood and honey soaked hands of Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, starting with Laura, played by Natasha Tazzini. This is where we get that iconic and sensational scene, the photo that went viral of Laura in the hot tub, and you have like Pooh and Piglet ominously standing behind her. And it was the popularity of these scene photos on social media that made the director Frank Waterfield decide to invest some more time and money on reshoots and final touch-ups to really deliver something that horror fans would enjoy. And to that, all I can say is, like, job well done, sir. Absolutely banging movie here. The rest of the movie unfolds as one would expect from a slasher film, reaching its climax. Who's going to die next and how. One by one, the cast is dealt a killing blow from either Piglet or Pooh, until there are only 2 finalists fighting to survive and take the title as the final girl. I don't want to spoil it, the whole movie, so that's all I'm going to say about the plot, and I'm going to focus on everything that I loved about this amazing slasher movie. And it's just that this movie is a classic slasher masterpiece in every single category. And I did some research to verify these categories. We've got Pooh and Piglet towering around in the background, very Halloween, Friday the 13th. I get this mix of Jason blended with Michael Myers vibe from Pooh, 6 feet tall, this menacing, this like plain, it's this plaid red shirt. It's like this plaid shirt. It's red with like yellow lines, and which they did a good job. Like, he's in a red shirt, but people were like, oh no, don't put him in a red shirt. But they got away with it in these blue overalls, and it's like 100% it's on display in this one of my favorite scenes of the movie. There's this showdown between Pooh and this group of heroic hillbillies that is absolutely amazing to watch, and it's such a good homage to the Halloween movies, very much like the scene from Halloween Kills when they gang up on Michael and then he just lets loose and wrecks everyone. That's what Pooh does in this scene, and it's just a series of oh shit moments just watching him deliver these brutal blows. Absolutely amazing. Next on the list of why it's a classic slasher masterpiece, the victim pool is exactly what you'd expect. Young and attractive, unaware of their surroundings. I mean, granted, there's no sex or drugs or any of that like the standard, but Pooh and Piglet don't care about that. They just don't like people getting close to their home, which sometimes is good enough. I mean, it's very Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You just stumbled onto my property and I'm going to kill you. The third, which brings us to the third category, the setting. A remote cottage in the country right next to some terrifying woods. Perfect slasher hunting grounds. I mean, literally, this movie checks every box for the classic slasher horror movie. Slowly killing the cast one by one, check. Killing everyone in a gore-tastic fashion, check. And the final girl, literally a checkbox of like every checkbox of the slasher franchise. Like I said, I did a deep dive on articles and forum posts to put that checklist together. And like you can Google the checklist. It's the points that everyone agrees on, including Randy Meeks. It's the gold stars it's all these gold stars that make me gush about this movie so much. Some of the best horror movies ever are from the slasher genre and follow maybe not all, but some of these rules, and they use practical effects over CGI because of small budgets, and it's like a recipe that when followed properly with care and attention to detail, it delivers some of the most successful, memorable horror movies ever produced. And in my opinion, Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey has a place up there with the other slasher classics, just absolutely. Now let's talk about budget and the box office and the reception of this amazing movie. It was reported in most of the articles that I read that the budget was, quote, under $100,000. However, in the interview with Amber Thorne, she said that the budget she heard was roughly £30,000, which is only $37,000 USD, which is significantly less than $100,000. And unless they spent more than the shooting budget on the advertisement budget, which I highly doubt, it's a lot less than $100,000, and it makes it even more impressive what they were able to pull off. The practical effects alone are stunning, and if somebody told me that just those cost $100,000, I would believe them. They put together incredibly talented cast and crew, and all of these individuals who were able to craft a goddamn masterpiece. And I'm thankful that I'm not alone in thinking that. The movie has been getting amazing press, and horror fans are absolutely loving the movie. Unfortunately, there are always going to be critics and average moviegoers that think it's a bad movie, or why are they doing this? They have no original ideas. It is original idea. You're taking something and turning it into something new and original. I'll just disagree with them. If you say that this is a bad movie, I'll simply disagree with you, and I will direct them to listen to the last 10 minutes of reasons of why I disagree. But that's their opinion. They can dislike the movie all they want. It doesn't make it any less good in my eyes, nor does it make it any less ticket sales. It doesn't make them any less impressive. For less than $100,000, the worldwide box office for Blood and Honey is a whopping $4.1 million. Absolutely fucking amazing, which has already greenlit the sequel. The film ends on some ominous words of Pooh will return, and according to Amber Thorne, we can look forward to seeing more characters like Owl and Rabbit in the sequel. Unfortunately, we probably won't get to see Tigger because of the like I said, the complex layer of copyright that is around him. Most of his copyright animation and all of that is still held by Disney, so so it's like a tricky line to walk there. But what's amazing is Frank Waterfield has confirmed already that he's penning the script for the sequel and aiming for a February 2024 release. So here's hoping that they're already filming the sequel and having a blast doing it. Like I said, according to the interviews and articles that I read, the actors were directed to be serious in their roles. It's about life and death and madness, and they all took this to heart and they delivered solid performances, right? Though it was a challenge at times, according to some of these interviews with the director and the actors. The cast and crew would regularly burst out laughing at lines with Pooh, like Pooh, no, it's Pooh, stuff like that. And when doing shots with all the dripping honey, which sounds like it would make everyone so sticky. So bless them for doing all that hard work out in the cold woods late at night, 16-hour days of shooting, sticky with honey, with fake blood, running through the woods, screaming until your throat is hoarse. Like, that does not sound like my cup of tea. So, bless them for all their hard work and everything that they put into making this movie amazing. And apparently the sequel has 5 times the budget. So if they were able to pull this off with like $40,000, basically 30,000 pounds, 37,000 USD, which is like, I'll take that from like somebody who was actually involved with the project, as being like more accurate than less than 100,000. So I mean, even if you take in like an extra 10,000 for advertising, that's still 47,000. You're still under 50,000. Like, they made a masterpiece for $50,000. If you like, they take it at the end of the day, you round up to a whole number. If they have 5 times that budget for the sequel, I really hope they stick to practical effects. They're gonna need a new cast. Like I said, you get down to 2 finalists. I don't want to spoil it, but you have to have a final girl. So like you're gonna need a whole new cast except Pooh and Piglet. And like I said, we're gonna get to see more characters. That's what Amber Thorne said in her interview, that we're gonna get to see Owl and Rabbit. So that's really cool. Maybe they can create some other animal hybrids. They can create some original characters that are just part of the design. That would be pretty cool. Hopefully they expand on the set pieces a bit. We can see more in depth, maybe stuff like that. I could go on forever about what I would hope to see in the sequel. But I love this movie. Like I said, classic slasher masterpiece that was made here. It has an 84-minute runtime. It really doesn't lag at any point. There's some really good jump scares. The horror, the gore, it's right on display, and it's everything that I love in these types of movies. And that's where I'm going to end today's show, just on a really high note. Loved this movie. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, drop me a comment, throw me a message. Let me know. I loved it. Let me know if you loved it or if you didn't love it. Let me know why. We can have a discussion. We can have a conversation. I'm always open for debate. This has been episode 7, season 2 of the Nerd Review of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed all the episodes here on the Nerd Review. And this is the Nerd signing off.